Welcome to this bite-sized video for the Digital Support Services T-Level, where we'll explore Assignment 1 for the Digital Infrastructure Occupational Specialism. This session is being delivered by myself, Helen Scanlon. I'm part of the Provider Development Team, and I'll be taking you through the assessment requirements, regulations and conditions. I'm joined today by our Digital Sector Manager, James Lane, who will add his subject specialist knowledge and experience. So hello, James, and thank you for collaborating with us on this bite-sized recording.
Hi, Helen, and as always, thanks for having me. So as Helen's mentioned, I'm going to be bringing some of the subject knowledge in this. I've worked on this or these assignments collectively for a number of years. I'm sure I've spoken to many of you watching about these individually, but as always, I'm going to put a call out there to say if you want any additional support, please do reach out to us, and Helen's going to have some information toward the end of this session on how you can do that.
Lovely, thank you, James. So, okay, let's get started. This assessment consists of 3 task-based assignments with a total duration of 24 hours and 30 minutes. It's designed to assess the 3 performance outcomes shown, each of which indicates the knowledge and skills required to enable students to achieve threshold competence in the chosen occupational specialism. For each performance outcome, there will be a list of knowledge and skills. The knowledge statements show what the students need to know, and the skills are what they need to perform. Some of this content will build upon the content delivered in Year 1. We'll be explaining the first OS assignment in this recording, and we'll be signposting you to the important documents and information on the NCFE website, the first of which are the key date schedule and the qualification-specific instructions for delivery. At the end of this recording, we'll share relevant links, including ones to these 2 documents. So taken from the tutor guidance and support documentation, the information we'll provide should help teachers to understand the requirements for the summative assessment activities for this specialism. The occupational specialism will be assessed through a series of synoptic assignments, which have been designed to be as occupationally realistic as possible, and these are set externally by NCFE. There are important factors to consider for these assessments, some of which you can see on the screen now. For this assignment, please take note of the assessment requirements you can see, and as we progress through the detail of each assignment, we'll also highlight any additional conditions that teaching staff should be aware of. So the occupational specialism will be assessed through a series of synoptic assignments, which have been designed to be as occupationally realistic as possible. This video is going to focus on assignment 1, and this assignment is about creating a project plan and design tasks. So assignment 1 consists of 3 separate tasks that occur on fixed dates and times specified by NCFE. The dates for each task can be found in our key dates schedule. And for the Summer 2025 series, the date for task 1 is shown on the screen now. Students will work independently under supervised conditions, and internet access is not allowed, and the information providers will need to plan and prepare for this assessment task will be released in advance of the task. All print screens the students should take should be numbered and linked to the task stated in the workbook, and the electronic workbooks are included in the assignment materials. If students have any access arrangements or reasonable adjustments, such as additional time for assessments, then providers should apply that internally and increase the task times by the relevant amount. The assessment material should only be made available to students during the scheduled session, so do take account of this and ensure you have secure storage areas for students' evidence. Brill. So assignment 1 is worth a total of 76 marks, and the marks are awarded against the skills and knowledge performance outcomes shown. Students will have a total of 13 hours to use the information in the assignment brief to carry out the work required and demonstrate their knowledge and skills. There are 20 marks allocated to this first task, and performance outcomes 1 and 2 are assessed. And you can see which marks are allocated to each PO. James, can I ask you to summarise a typical project brief and activities for this task, please?
Absolutely, yeah. So thinking about the specimen assessment material, the original blueprint SAM that we created, the scenario is around a company called Willow Technology. And this is a company that works in the creative industry, building websites, computer animation, videos, and some motion capture work. And that's going to become relevant within the scenario as we move through the assignments. So task 1 is around planning. And you're going to be working on the building's infrastructure that is due to go live in 60 days. So task 1 will see developing a small test network to verify the network compatibility. And we're going to think about designing and selecting the infrastructure, starting with servers and storage. Thinking about the data is going to need to be migrated from the old system, and the storage is to include the storage of the various websites, databases, audio, video, and graphics that I kind of alluded to earlier in the scenario. And then thinking about the communication equipment as well, including any new switches, wireless infrastructure, and CCTV. Now, the student is not responsible for the installation of the network cabling at this point. The scenario allows for that to be handled by a third party. And the student will need to develop a project plan and a Gantt chart and consider all legal requirements that need to be addressed for such a project and identify a range of physical and digital security vulnerabilities, and of course the countermeasures that can be applied to mitigate those threats. And that's essentially the scenario and task 1 at this point.
Lovely, thanks for that detail, James. And then finally on the screen now, you can see a summary of what evidence the students will need to produce, and then therefore centres will submit to NCFE for marking. Okay, moving on to the second task for this assignment related to designing the servers and storage. Students have a total of 5 hours to complete this task at set dates and times. And again, the summer 2025 dates can be seen on the screen now. These do change each year, so please do check the key date schedule we mentioned earlier for other years other than 2025. So moving on to the assessment requirements, internet access is allowed for the research purposes only, and students will need to take print screens as they did for task 1. There's also a requirement for them to submit their browsing history for this. And then moving into the task in more detail, the marks awarded and how they relate to the performance outcomes can be seen on the screen now. And I'm going to go back to James to ask about what the students would normally do for this task, please.
Okay, so in task 2, we're still on the same scenario, but now obviously designing the servers and the storage. So you'll be creating a technical proposal for the services, roles, storage, and operating systems, and a diagram of the physical server organization for this client to review and your line manager to sign off. And this is going to mean researching vendors and making proposals on where this equipment should or could be sourced from. So we want the student to really kind of get into the elements of the network and to be thinking about where they could secure those from, or where they could source them from, and how they might start to work together, that kind of thing.
Great, thank you, James. And then finally, the evidence requirements can also be seen on the screen now. The students will produce these and providers will upload them to the portal for marking. Okay, moving on to the third task for this assignment, and it's related to designing the communication equipment. The students again have 5 hours to complete this task and it's set date and times. And again, summer 2025 date and time can be seen on the screen now. And remember, these change each year, so please do check the key date schedule mentioned earlier. Moving on to the assessment requirements, again, internet access is allowed for research, and there's the same requirement for submitting their browsing history as task 2. I'm going to ask James for his specialist knowledge on this task, please.
Yeah, so when they're thinking about pulling those ideas together, and specifically in light of the research element to this, I think it's really important that you take a look at the GSAMs that have been produced for these types of tasks, so you can see that difference between a pass and a distinction grade, and what is definitely an area worth focusing on is essentially that kind of reasoned judgments and the rationale as to how they've chosen their selections for the prospective purchase of equipment, I suppose is the way to put it. So it's not just about going for the cheapest, it's going for, well, it's not for me to say what they should go for, but it's justifying how they've made that decision. I would really strongly encourage them to be thinking about that at this point.
Thank you, James. And then the task in more detail again, the marks awarded and how they relate to the performance outcomes are shown on the screen now. Is there anything in particular you want to add for the brief on this one, James?
Not beyond what I've already mentioned. I think it's thinking really carefully about how they've come to those conclusions.
Okay, lovely. And finally, the evidence requirements can also be seen on the screen now for task 3. So this slide shows the section of the website where you'll find the support and sample materials on. This includes specimen assignment briefs, the GSEMs or guide standard exemplification materials that James was talking about. And this includes example student material showing what a pass and distinction looks like for each of the assignments. And you'll also find all the previous live assignments. We've also included the links to the current QSID and key date schedule, which can also be found on the NCFE website. The evidence for a successful setup for task 2 should be taken that'll log in. Sorry, I'm just going to stop again because James, I think this is what you've added. So I'm going to pause again and take this out.
What did I add? Sorry.
It's all right. What I'm going to do is just go back to the beginning of this slide and take this one out as well and just redo this one. So just bear with me a second. So this slide shows the section of the website you'll find the support and sample assessment materials on, and this includes specimen assignment briefs, the guide standard exemplification materials that James was talking about earlier, including the sample student assignments and the pass and distinction, what it looks like, and you also find the previous live assessments. And then we've also included the links to the current QSID and key date schedule, which can also be found on the NCFE website. James, before we finish, is there anything else you'd like to add for assignment 1?
Just to put in that ever popular reminder about the GSEMs. I think, take a look at those, and if you take a look at the briefs, there's past papers available via the same links that you've already shared. These are really useful to expose the students to the type of tasks. You'll see the scenario will change each time, but generally speaking, the type of activity that we're asking students to do is fairly consistent. So these make really good practice and will really help to accelerate those your students into higher grade boundaries.
Lovely, thank you. So we hope you found this useful and got a better understanding of the expectations, regulations, etc. for assignment 1. Please do see the other bite-sized videos that form part of this occupational specialism series. And then there's a QR code there to leave us some feedback on how useful you found this recording. Thank you very much.